Shabbos Daf Nun Dalid is completely about defining various different devices that animals wore. From the beginning of the Daf until the first Mishnah continues defining things that were in our last Mishnah. It gives a little psak halacha as to what the goats are allowed to wear. We have the next Mishnah and a long list of defining the terms in the Mishnah, and then there's a second Mishnah on the Daf with more terms as to what animals used to wear, and the Gemara again defines what these objects were and why the animals were not allowed to wear them. Towards the end of the Daf, the Gemara talks about the fact that people who are in a position to protest against others who are doing averos are held accountable for their sins if they do not protest against. From the beginning of the Daf until the Mishnah, the Gemara will define two of the terms in the previous Mishnah. It'll define the word kavulas, which refer to female sheep, and it'll also define the term kivunois, which also refer to female sheep. Now, Gemara will have some explanation as to where we got the definitions from, and then we'll go back to the discussion of the goats with the pouches over their udders and try to figure out whom the halacha is like. So let's begin. The Mishnah had said that rechelim, used female sheep, are allowed to go out into the public domain if they are kivulos. So the Gemara says, what does the word kivulos mean? The Gemara says it means that the owners tie their tails downwards, covering their female area so that the males cannot come up upon them. And the Gemara says, well, how do you know that the word kivulos? Kivulos here is being defined as from the word kavul, meaning tied up. How do you know that the word kavul means a type of tying that's meant to make things not fruitful? The Gemara says we could learn from a discussion that Hiram, the king of Tsur, had after he gave gold and silver to Shlomo HaMelech to build the Beis HaMikdash. Shlomo HaMelech gave him a gift of 22 cities in the Galil. So Hiram went to inspect them, and Hiram wasn't pleased. And his comment was, Vayikol Lahem Eretz Kavol. He called them a land of Kavol. So what does Kavol mean? So Rav Huna says Kavul means that they were wrapped. Wrapped in what? Wrapped in silver and gold, meaning the people there were very rich. So the Gemara hasn't yet explained what it has to do with tying up the tails of sheep, but we'll get there. So the Gemara says that Rav said to Rav Huna, well, if that's what it means, so why was he complaining? Shlomo HaMelech gave him 22 cities of rich, wealthy people. So the Gemara answers he was not happy because the rich people aren't going to do the work that the king needs them to do. That's not what rich people usually, they're not very helpful in that way. And therefore he wasn't happy. And the second side is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said that kavol, it doesn't mean that the land was rich, it means that the land itself, the earth, was dried and salty. It's called kavol because when you'd step on it, your foot would sink into it up to the ankle, and the word ankle in Hebrew is called kavol sometimes. Okay, so we'll sink up to the ankle. Now, the last line of this discussion is what we need for ours, and that people would call it Eretz Kabul Ara Mikabla Doi Avde Peri, an ankle deep land that doesn't produce fruit. So here you see that the word Kabul is connected to being not fruitful, and that's how we understand that the word Kavulos, referring to sheep, means tying them up so they shouldn't be fruitful. Okay, now the Gemara goes to the second word. The Mishnah had said, it was actually the third, but it's the second for our daf, kavunos. What does kavunos mean? The Gemara says it means that they wrapped a leather blanket around sheep from the day that they were born, and they left it around them, fastened on, in order to keep the wool very high quality. The wool would be kept clean, it would be used for melas, high quality wool, and that's called kavunos, wrapping it in that. Okay, the Gemara says you can prove this from the Mishnah discussing taras. It says that the proper color of taras is, if it's a se'es, is like white wool. And it's the white wool of a one-day-old lamb, which is producing melas, which is very clean and beautiful. So now the Gemara says, let's go back to the goats. The goats, we said, they're allowed to, we had a discussion in the Mishnah, a three-way machlokes between the Tanaim, what they are allowed to have wrapped around their udders. According to Rabbi Yosef, not have anything, and not have a pouch around their udders for any circumstance. According to Rabbi Yehuda, they're allowed to have it to dry up the milk, but not to collect dripping milk. And according to the Tanna Kamma, Rabbi Meir, you're allowed to have it for any reason. So the Gemara has three versions of Amoraim deciding what the halacha is here. Paskening the halacha, Ras's halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, and you're only allowed to, that it's permitted to have the pouch in order to dry the milk up. But Shmuel says like Rabbi Yossi, you're not allowed to have it for any reason. That's one version of this, and whereas the second version were the same halachos, but it wasn't connected to the Mishnah. Rav and Shmuel Rav said you're allowed to have it for dry up the milk, but it didn't say anything about the Mishnah. And Shmuel said you aren't allowed to have the pouch for any reason, and again, he didn't say anything about the Mishnah. According to the third version of this, we just have Shmuel's comment, and it was not on this Mishnah, it was on a Brisa. The Brisa says that goats are allowed to have a pouch tied to their udders to dry up the milk, not to collect milk. That sounds like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. And then the Brisa adds, Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseir said that would be true. The problem is you can't tell the difference. And in order to prevent a situation in which people will use it to collect milk and claim that it was to dry up, or that you wouldn't be able to tell, therefore we say that they're both aser. And Shmuel said that is taka the halacha. According to this, Shmuel is saying that it's forbidden to have the pouch for any reason, but not because it's carrying. The reason why it's forbidden in the case of collecting the milk is because the reason why it's forbidden in the case of drying up is because it looks like collecting the milk. You can't necessarily tell the difference. We now begin the next Mishnah, which discusses three types of attachments to animals that are forbidden for the animal to travel in the public domain with on Shabbos. And the Gemara, brief until the next Mishnah after that, the Gemara will explain what each of the three things are. So let's begin. First of all, the Mishnah says a mitzultelis. So an animal is not allowed to wear a mitzultelis in the street. Now the Gemara doesn't explain exactly what a mitzultelis is. Rashi has three explanations. One is that it's a strap that attaches the animal's load to its tail so it doesn't slide forward. Another explanation is that it's a blanket that goes over the animal under the saddle. And Rashi's own shot, which he prefers, is that it's a cushion that goes between the tail and a strap of leather to prevent it from scratching the animal. Okay, so an animal is not allowed to wear that on Shabbos. It's also not allowed to have its legs tied up. There are two forms of leg chains on animals. One is called akud, and one is called rogul. The Gemara will explain what these are. And then we talk about the leash. So the Gemara has the Mishnah, has a few halachos over here. You cannot tie animals to each other and pull one lead rope leading all of them. The Gemara will explain why not. You can hold the ropes of multiple animals in your hand at once, but you got to be careful not to wind the ropes around your hand. And the Gemara will give some additional halachos about how to carry a leash on Shabbos. Now, the animal that the Mishnah discusses in all these cases is a camel, but the Mishnah says that it refers to other animals as well. Okay, so let's begin the Gemara, which will discuss each of the three. First of all, mitzultelis. The Gemara quotes a Brisa. It says a camel is not allowed to have a mitzultelis tied to its tail, but it is allowed to have a mitzultelis tied to the tail and the hump. And it's allowed to have a mitzultelis tied to its placenta. So, again, there's three different opinions what a mitzultelis is, but the concern with a mitzultelis is that it may fall off, and if it falls off, you'll carry it. So, these cases where it's attached to the tail and the hump, it won't fall off because it's firmly fixed, and when it's attached to the placenta, it won't fall off because it'll hurt the animal. If it falls off, the animal will make sure that it doesn't fall off. Okay. Next thing is the legs tied to each other. We had akud and regol. So what are these things? So akud, Rabbi Yehuda says, is like akedas Yitzchak. Yitzchak's hands and feet were tied to each other. The hands and feet were all tied together in one. So Rabbi Yehuda says it means that a front foot, meaning like a hand, is tied to the back foot. Meaning you take the animal's front leg and tie it to a back leg. The Gemara says that can't be what it means. There's a brisa that says that akud means that the forelegs are tied to each other, or the hind legs are tied to each other. It says, Rabbi Yehuda holds like a different brisa. There's a different brisa that says, no, it could be either one. It could be the forelegs tied to each other, or the hind legs tied to each other, or the forelegs tied to the hind legs. And he says, that still doesn't fit with Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said it has to be only forelegs to hind legs. So Gemara answers that there is a third brisa. The brisa, that's what he holds like. The third one says that akud means tied like Yitzchak, ba'akid as Yitzchak, which implies that it means that the forelegs are tied to the hind legs. Okay, now along the way, I skipped it, but along the way, the Brises define what rogul means. Rabbi Yehuda said rogul means that the leg is folded. One of the forelegs is folded, and it's tied in a folded position so that the animal can only stand on 3 legs. There is no dispute. All the Brises that were quoted agree with that. Now, what's the reason that all these forms of tying the animal's legs are forbidden? They're all carrying, because it doesn't serve, the rope is not helping the animal, it's hurting the animal, and therefore the animal's just carrying it, and it's forbidden. Now let's go to the leashes. So we said you can't tie animals to each other in a chain and pull the front one. The Mishnah had said camels can't do it. What's the reason? The Gemara says because it looks like you're leading them to the market, so it's a darbanan to pull the animals in a way that appears like it's going to the market. Okay, next is that you can carry all the leashes in your hand at once, as long as you don't wind them around your hand. So the Gemara says, what's the problem with that? So the Gemara says, kilayim. Now there's 2 types of kilayim. Kilayim can mean that you are having 2 different species of animals harnessed to pull a load together, like if you have a cow hitched to a donkey, that's kilayim. Or kilayim could be shatnez, you're wearing something made out of wool and linen together. So the Gemara asks, what kilayim? If you're holding leashes wrapped around your hand, what's kilayim there? So what first offer is, maybe it means that the person going to be pulling something together with the camel, and the person and the camel are therefore tied together pulling a load. Someone says, no, that's not a problem. A person is always allowed to help his animal. It's never kilayim. Someone says, no, so it means that the ropes might be made of some out of wool and some out of linen, and if they're wrapped around your hand, so your hand is going to be warmed by them, by wool and linen together, so that's shatnez. So that can't be it, because shatnez is not a problem if it's just wrapped. It has to be that that the straps are actually attached to each other. Someone says, yeah, that's what it means. It means that you may tie the ropes in a knot, or 2 knots. Some of them will be wool, some will be linen. You wrap it around your hand, then it'll be benefiting from shatnez that's tied together as one object. Okay, now the Gemara adds some halachos to how you could use leashes. Again, these halachos all apply to all animals. The same thing would be if you're walking a dog on Shabbos, you're allowed to hold a leash under these circumstances. Wrapping the leash around your hand wouldn't necessarily be a problem, but Shmuel says you have to make sure that the leash is not hanging a tefach below your hand, meaning you're not holding the end of the leash, you're holding a tefach from the end, and the last tefach is hanging below your hand, so you shouldn't have that. And the reason for that is that it looks like you're holding a rope. It doesn't look like you're leading an animal. So we're asked, with Shmuel's yeshiva said that it's allowed to be up to 2 tvachim. Where says Shmuel, yeah, Shmuel holds that it's allowed to be up to 2, but if somebody asks you the halacha, you should say 1 tefach to avoid getting too close to the edge of the precipice of violating this halacha. And the Gemara says another halacha is that you have to make sure that the leash doesn't hang to within a tefach from the ground. So the Gemara asks that doesn't fit with Shmuel. Shmuel said it has to be not hanging a tefach from your hand. Didn't say anything about how far it is from the ground. But this is referring to the loop of rope from your hand to the animal. That rope should not hang to within a tefach of the ground. And the reason again for that is that it looks like the animal there is carrying a rope. It doesn't look like you are leading the animal by the rope. Okay. The next Mishnah lists a number of various different devices which animals may wear that are all forbidden to be worn on Shabbos. The Gemara explains each of them one by one. So I'm just going to incorporate the Gemara's explanations into the Mishnah, because it's hard to understand the Mishnah at all without the explanations of the Gemara. So the first thing on the list is that a donkey may not go out wearing a saddlecloth if the saddlecloth, meaning the blanket, is not tied onto it. The reason for that, the Gemara says, is as we saw earlier, because if it's not tied, it's not warming the donkey, and therefore it's carrying. The next thing is, the donkey cannot have a ladder on its neck. The Gemara says that's a piece of wood that you stick on the side of the animal's face so that it doesn't scratch a wound that it has. Okay, now, from here on in, all these things are forbidden because they may fall off, and they have value, and therefore a person may carry them. Okay, next, the donkey cannot have a strap on its leg. That's to prevent its hooves from knocking into each other and injuring itself. It was for short-legged animals. The chickens are not allowed to have strings. Those are identifying marks that you can tell one person's chickens from another. Chickens are not allowed to have a strap on their feet that ties their feet together so that they don't spray rocks out from their feet, which could then break things. Rams are not allowed to have a little wagon under their tail. That was the sheep have a big, square, fatty tail that sometimes dragged on the ground. So this was to prevent it from being scratched by the floor. Now, rechelim, female sheep are not allowed to be chanunos. So the Gemara has some lengthy discussion about what chanunos are. V'achabar Ula says that after they shear the sheep, they put a special pack of cloth soaked in oil on its forehead to keep it warm. So Rav Chisda said that's treating the sheep like marokva. The sheep do not need to be pampered in that way, and therefore it's carrying for sure. It can't be what the Mishnah means. So the Gemara says, no, it means that they put these oil cloths on the sheep's forehead and on the womb when it was giving birth. So Rav Nachman said that can't be either. That's also pampering the sheep too much, like Yalta. Yalta was Rav Nachman's own wife. So Gemara says no. So we have some other explanations here. Chanun means is a tree overseas that grows, and the tree's name is Chanun, and they would bring a chip of wood from that Chanun tree, and they would stick it in the sheep's nose, and then would sneeze, and that would cause the worms in its head to fall out. The Gemara says, why is that only for the female sheep? The Gemara says the male sheep don't need it because they're constantly whacking each other on the heads. They hit their heads to each other, and therefore the worms fall out on their own. Rav Shimon Nazir said it wasn't Chanun wood, it was Rosim wood. And now the Gemara wants to know, so why is it called Chanunos? Why is it called Chanunos according to him? And why is it called Chanunos if it's this oil cloth? So it says Chanun from the word graciousness. So you're doing something kind to the sheep to help them. Okay, next in the Mishnah was a gimon. A calf is not allowed to have a gimon. The Gemara says that's a small training yoke that trains it to wear the yoke on its neck and keep its head folded down. Whereas, how do you know that gimon means keeping your head down? The Gemara says from the pasuk in Yeshaya that says Halachoif ka'agmen roshei, that Hashem want you to bend your head in an outward show of contrition, and the word agamain refers to a fish hook that is curved. So it's saying to bend your head. So gimon and agmon are similar words, and therefore gimon also means to keep the head down, and that's what the yoke is for. Okay. Next thing the Mishnah says is a cow is not allowed to wear a porcupine skin. The Gemara says that the reason why they would put that is they would wrap that around the cow's udders in order that animal called Ya'eli would not suck milk from the udders. Tosa says that refers to porcupines themselves. Okay, next, a cow is not allowed to have a strap between its horns. So this was discussed earlier on Daf Nun Vez. Over there was a machlokes between Rav and Shmuel whether that is for controlling the cow or that it is for a design for an adornment. Each one according to his own opinion as to why it would be forbidden. If it's as an adornment, it's forbidden for sure because cows don't usually wear ribbons, and if it's to control the cow, it's too much because the cows don't need to be controlled. They walk nicely in front. Now the Mishnah says the cow of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah used to wear a strap, and the Chachamim were upset about it. So the Mishnah says, first of all, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had just his Meiser Behema, which he took off 1 in 10. He had 12,000 cows a year. So he had 120,000 calves born every year. He didn't have one cow. And what it means is that he had a neighbor. There was a woman who was a neighbor of his, and she had one cow, and she kept the ribbon on the cow, and Rav Elazar ben Azariah didn't say anything about it, and therefore he's blamed for it. Now the Gemara quotes some statements about people being blamed for not protesting against other people's sins. The Gemara quotes from Rav, and Rav Chanina, and Rav Yechanan, and Rav Chaviva. So the Gemara interrupts and says, whenever you see this group, it's not clear if it's Rav Yechanan or Rav Yonasan. There's different, but anyway, they said the following thing. They said somebody who could stop his household members from doing averos and he doesn't is punished for them. Somebody could stop the people of his city from Averis and doesn't say anything is punished for them. And the same thing goes for the entire world. If he has the ability to protest the entire world, he's blamed for their Averis. Now the Gemara says that the Reish Galusa, the governor of the Jewish community, was punished for the sins of the entire Jewish community because they could have done something about it. The Gemara brings a pasuk to support this. Chanina said, there is a pasuk in Yeshaya that says, Shem Mishpat Yavayim Zikna Ami Rasarv HaKadosh Baruch Hu will judge the elders of the people and the rulers. So Chazal say the elders didn't do anything wrong. Elders refers to the Sanhedrin. They did nothing wrong, but they are judged because they didn't protest against the leaders, the Sarav, the princes, who they could have blocked from doing Averos for everyone else.